Rebecca will take us through the role of the solicitor in hearings and the importance of understanding that role. Nicola's going to talk a little bit about how the guides were developed and the collaborative approach around that. I'll speak around what children told us. So much of this work is based on what children have told us through research and then how we've tested that out across this project. And Nicola and Rebecca will then tell us what adults have contributed to this bit of work and how we can bring all of these voices together. We'll share with you some top tips for solicitors. Now, many of you on the call won't be solicitors, so you can think about that in terms of how you work alongside solicitors, but also many of them will apply to you if you support children or involved in the hearing system in any way. We'll share some next steps, and then we'll look at some question and answers and an opportunity for you to contribute. I'll start off on the next slide and just set some context for today. Our overall aim when we started this work was to promote solicitor best practice in children's hearings, in line with what children tell us is important to them and to ensure children are aware of their rights to a solicitor. This is crucial as children and families have the right to high quality legal advice and representation. Upholding the rights of children in the hearings requires a unique skill set. There are many examples of good practice by solicitors and of children who have positive experiences of lawyers representing them. The purpose of this work is to highlight this good practice, to promote better understanding of the solicitor's role, the child's right to a solicitor, and how a solicitor can help them. I'm now going to pass over to Rebecca, who's going to talk about the role of the solicitor in children's hearings.
Thank you. So understanding the role of the solicitor in the children's hearings is very important in order for everybody within the children's hearing room, not just the solicitor's client. It's important that all professionals and panel members within that room understand, and when I say the role of the solicitor, what they're doing and why they're doing it. The role of the solicitor at children's hearing is to help the child or relevant person to participate effectively in that hearing. This can include giving the child's or relevant person's views directly to the hearing, assisting them to give their own views directly to the hearing, or also assisting them to give their views in writing or by other means to ensure that the hearing is taking the legal rights of the person into account in their consideration, or a combination of these roles. Solicitors have rules which they must follow. All solicitors practising law in Scotland have a practising certificate with the Law Society of Scotland, and in order to retain that practising certificate, solicitors have to follow certain rules, and one of them is that a solicitor must always act on the instructions of the person they are representing, whether that be the child or relevant person or PI, irrespective of the solicitor's personal view of whether those instructions are in the child's best interests. So solicitors are not required to have the welfare of the child as the paramount consideration in their representations to the hearing on behalf of the child or any other person. However, as part of the preparation before attending the hearing, the solicitor should have had the opportunity to go through the papers with their client. That's part of the reason why it's important in order that materials are shared so that the solicitor can have that opportunity to have a discussion with their client in order that they can explain what's being put forward, what the hearing have in hand. And at that point, they will explain all recommendations and proposals which will be put to the panel. It is never the solicitor's job to persuade the client regarding recommendations, but will present the positions and provide legal advice. The solicitor here plays a very important role in making sure all information has been shared with their client, whether they're a child or relevant person. And the solicitor is then the person in the hearing room who will be able to present their client's position to the children's hearing, which actually this can often be the most effective way of the panel ensuring they're obtaining informed views.
And we'll now pass to Nicola, who's going to talk about how we developed the guides.
Thanks, Gordon. So in order to develop this guide, a project team was brought together, all of which had a variety of knowledge and experience of solicitors within the hearing system. And as you can see on the slide, there was a lot of organisations that were involved, including Our Hearing's Our Voice, representation from solicitors firms, SCRA, Clan Child Law, advocacy workers, and CHS. So in order to kind of pick key themes to consider for this guide, the project team reviewed different literature and research that looked at what children in hearings or what children in conflict with the law wanted from solicitors, some of which included reports and articles from the Independent Care Review, Celsus and CYCJ. So once the themes had been identified, they were discussed with different groups that had first-hand experience with the hearing system, and their views were gathered on what should be included within this guide. So as you can see first on the slide, it was important for the project team to speak to children and young people who have had experience within the children's hearing system, and for them to provide their views on solicitors within the hearing room. And as the children's panels to be centred around the child, it was paramount that we took their views into account when creating this guide, and they were able to provide a unique experience and perspective and kind of sense check the ideas that were raised within the research. After this, panel members who were having frequent interaction with solicitors within hearings, it was felt that their perspective was also important to include. So at CHS, we gathered the views of panel members on key themes from the research and gave them an opportunity to suggest helpful behaviour demonstrated by solicitors, as well as some negative experience they may have had. The next group of people that were spoken to were solicitors themselves. So information was gathered through focus groups with various solicitors within the field. They were asked to respond to what children and young people had said that they wanted and needed from solicitors. And thereafter, they were given the opportunity to recommend how this guidance could be most effective in creating change, what the best practice would be, and some barriers that they face. And so the second last bullet point on the slide, finally, the National Provider Network for Advocacy also had an input of the structural factors that can sometimes inhibit good practice by solicitors in hearings, but also positive qualities of solicitors that have been highlighted during their practice. So once all of that information was gathered from various sources and the individuals and organisations, it was then collated by the project teams and collaboratively drafted into the guidance and top tips that's been produced.
Lisa Mason, who's a board member with Our Hearing's Our Voice. You can see her face on the screen there. Lisa was heavily involved in the initial stages of the guide and testing out the guide as we went, alongside Liam McGowan, another board member. Lisa recorded some thoughts in advance, and throughout today's launch we have some little snips of what Lisa wanted to say to the audience. So we've got two on the screen just now. Thanks, Lisa, for joining me to talk about the Good Practice Guide for Solicitors. You've been involved in that right from the start. You've got two types of expertise when it comes to doing this piece of work. Could you say a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stornoway, and I had lots of solicitors working with me and my family. And more recently, I've been studying and wanting to become one myself.
So I've got another question for you, Lisa. We spent time checking out the views of children with experience of hearings and what they need from solicitors. Can you tell us how we did that?
Yeah, so one example is we went to the Highland Champs and we spoke to the young people there. We got their views on what they needed from solicitors, but also what solicitors needed from them. And we collected their views, and that's how we've gathered our data. And we've worked with other groups as well. Thanks
so much for your contribution. And we'll hear a little bit more from Lisa as we go through the presentation. Just want to build on what Lisa was talking about there. These are the themes that initially came from the research and other papers that Nicola mentioned earlier. There's longer references to all of that within the bigger guide that we've posted for you, you'll see that what children need from solicitors, they need them to have knowledge, values, certain personal qualities and ways of being, and skills. So you can read the slide. You'll see, critically, solicitors need to have a good knowledge of the law and how to implement that. But they also need to know about trauma and neglect. They need to know how children develop, and they need to know about things that might get in the way of their understanding. The values, I think, apply to all of us, and not just to solicitors. Being non-judgmental, really thinking about the dignity of the child, being honest, and having respect for others. And I'll not go through all of the qualities or ways of being, but you can see what children are looking for from solicitors, and of course they look for that from most adults in their life. And they don't always get that from all adults in their life, so it's critically important that all professionals adhere to that. And these skills are ones that are key for solicitors as well, and for other adults. The ability to communicate at any level, to advocate for children, and just to expand on the oversimplifying skill. The children don't want to be patronised. They need to know in clear terms what the hearing system means for them, what decisions mean, and of course we all have a responsibility for that, but they don't want that to be oversimplified or minimised. So that's the work that we took out to children initially, to test all of this out, and Lisa's spoken a little bit about that. So we'll move to the next slide, and we'll hear from Lisa again. So Lisa talks about why these qualities in solicitors are so important to children involved in hearings.
My next question is, children spoke about knowledge, values, personal qualities and skills of solicitors. Why do you think children spoke about those things and not others?
I think these values, skills and personal qualities are all important because that's what makes a relationship with a solicitor, and it's a way children are able to speak easily with them and get their point across without feeling judged or scared to be not coming across right. Yeah, from speaking to a lot of the young people and from the different groups, they felt it was important that the solicitors took their word and made them feel safe, and that they could only do the job that if they spoke to the child in a child-friendly way.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Lisa speaks so clearly and from the heart about what's important, and she bases that on all of the conversations that she's had with groups of children and young people. I'm going to turn the attention to what adults say solicitors need to deliver. So Nicola's going to speak a bit about the qualities and some barriers that advocacy providers highlighted in the work.
Yeah, so when discussing this with advocacy providers, they were asked to look at the same areas that children and young people were asked to look at, and they actually endorsed the same qualities needed in solicitors that we previously seen on the slide that Gordon was telling us about. So they highlight that the solicitors need to be fully involved, engaged, well informed of the circumstances and needs, and communicating well with the child or young person. And then advocacy providers also raise some barriers that can impact solicitors' capacity to act in children's hearing contexts that are also important to look at. So in terms of the first 4 bullet points, it kind of revolves around the challenges of obtaining representation for this type of work. So advocacy providers highlighted the perception that solicitors who work in this area only cover bigger cities such as Glasgow or Edinburgh. While there can be challenges in obtaining representation from a specialised solicitor in more rural areas, there are solicitors who undertake this type of work across Scotland, and we often know that solicitors will travel for hearings both children's hearings and also court hearings, even if they're based in major cities. But that is a barrier that the advocacy providers have raised. An important point that they also raised is in relation to not always getting the choice in selecting the right solicitor. So this ties in with the next bullet point, which is on the slide, that can often be a last minute or short notice hearing. So there's often times where solicitors may be duty appointed to the child if it's an emergency hearing, meaning that the child has no choice on who that might be, or the child's normal solicitor that supports them is not available because they have court or another appointment, and therefore another solicitor from that firm attends. And so that can be quite difficult for the child or young person, as they have to speak to a person that's not known to them, go through the whole background again, and there can be quite difficult topics that they have to cover. And then when looking at the barriers in terms of when it comes to legal aid, there are a lot of firms across Scotland who don't provide legal aid for a wide variety of reasons. But if the person requires legal representation and needs legal aid to cover the costs, this can narrow the pool of available solicitors. And as many of you might be aware, legal aid funding doesn't cover the costs involved in representation, including rapport building. And so that can be difficult for the solicitor to spend lengthy time with the client because they're not getting paid to do that, and their time needs to be spent elsewhere. So that's specifically important when representing children and young people, because we know that in order to effectively represent them, a trusting relationship requires to be built between the solicitor and the child in order for them to feel comfortable to speak about difficult parts of their lives. And so in the last point of the slide, advocacy providers raised the point that's also discussed within the guide, that there's a lack of clarity in what solicitors can and cannot do, and that's what Rebecca was talking about earlier on. As we've heard earlier, solicitors have to act on the instructions of their clients, which can often be in a misconception of how this interacts with the welfare of the child being paramount. But it's encouraging to see that advocacy providers are actively seeking out ways to provide clarity on the solicitor's role and ensure that children are provided quality legal support. So hopefully this guide being produced will further this, and we can start ensuring that everybody knows the solicitor's role and that children are advocated well for. And I believe that it's the next slide is also something that I'm going to speak about, which is in relation to panel members.
Nicola, I was just going to say thanks for sharing all of that. A really balanced view from advocacy providers, but also thanks to the advocacy providers who shared their time to help in the development of the approach. But you're absolutely right. You're up again in relation to the response from panel members.
Yeah, thank you. So as I outlined earlier at the beginning of the event, we spoke to panel members to get their perspective and views of solicitors within the hearing room in order to kind of inform the guide. And at Children's Hearing Scotland, we have what's called a practice and policy bank, which is made up of members of the panel community who volunteer to take part in different methods of research, such as surveys or focus groups, which will help to provide clarity on different topics. So the practice and policy bank was used in order to obtain views from the panel community about solicitor best practice in hearings, of which we received 66 responses. So panel members were asked questions about values, qualities, skills and knowledge of solicitors in hearings, but it's important to remember that this was in relation to solicitors in general, not just when solicitors were representing children. So as you can see on the slide, the responses we received were quite varied. However, panel members appear to have kind of both positive and negative experiences and views that mirror each other. So we can identify some key core strengths that will be helpful for solicitors within the hearing room. So just to go through some of them. So some panel members have experiences of solicitors being combative or adversarial, using legal jargon, stating that they're going to appeal when they're still in the hearing, and being dismissive or disrespectful. But conversely, they also have positive experiences of solicitors being collaborative with the panel and other professionals, being respectful, diffusing tense situations, communicating views with their client, and encouraging positive participation. So we can see there's a variety of experiences from panel members across Scotland about how solicitors conduct themselves within hearings, all in the same vein. But it's quite clear that it's helpful for panel members if solicitors can have a deep understanding of the children's hearing, managing the client's expectations, and being able to explain and engage in the process. And it's also important for them to ensure that solicitors are aware of the client's position as well as the full background of the case. And it's more challenging when panels or panel members feel as though that the conduct of the solicitor takes away from the focus of the best interests of the child, although, as we've already heard today, there is a confusion about why or the role of a solicitor, but it should always be kept in mind that the position of the client should be framed in a way as though it's keeping in best interest of the child. So overall, in terms of the feedback from panel members, it appears to highlight key qualities and attributes that are that can create a positive experience during panels, and that helps us provide some insight for solicitors in how they can conduct themselves and ensure that the hearings are most effective.
Thanks so much, Nicola. So we're really grateful to the panel community for sharing their views in such a broad way, and for highlighting where things work really well and how we can build upon that. Of course, panel members, and in particular the chair of the panel, is a key role in managing children's hearings and supporting a positive relationship with all of the adults that contribute to the hearing, including solicitors. So thanks for that. We'll continue to build on those views. Rebecca's now going to talk us through some of the feedback that we received from solicitors throughout the whole process.
So this section covers the solicitor's role before, during and after the hearing. It's important in relation to before the hearing that communication is done in terms of what is best for that individual client and what that individual client wants. That might mean a different approach depending on the age of the child, the age of the adult, the relevant person, or really what matters are being discussed. The solicitor also needs time beforehand to build a relationship. There's often, as everybody who is involved in panels will know, it's often very sensitive and personal information that's been discussed. So just to dive straight into those discussions can be quite difficult for the client, understandably, and it's important to have a relationship beforehand. Consistency with the solicitor really helps. So, and that again relies on the relationship being there. It's not helpful if you meet with one solicitor but then a different solicitor attends your hearing. Working alongside advocacy workers, both of you understanding each other's role, and where an advocacy worker is better placed for certain things and where a solicitor is better placed. Clarity of the role with all professionals, so everybody understanding what the role of that solicitor is, not just panel members but the social work as well, really understanding where that solicitor can come into play, and being available, the solicitor being available to speak to the client, both before, that's also consistent with during and after the hearing as well, and managing the expectations. Managing expectations for a solicitor is, again, takes you back to something that they must do. And it can be reassuring for a panel member's point of view if they can see that a solicitor is involved with a child, young person, or relevant person, or even a participation individual, because you can be assured that that solicitor has had to manage that person's expectations. So coming into the hearing room, they have had those discussions about paperwork beforehand. They've told them what other people are recommending. They've told them, what the chances are, and that can really help the client take that information or the decision making on board when they're in the hearing room. During and after the hearing, that kind of leads on from managing expectations as well. There can actually be a real benefit in reducing confrontation within the hearing room. That the solicitor can be the voice for the person as well, and they can take a large amount of the emotion out of it, where the client themselves would not be able to. They can consider their language, and they can also support the client to effectively participate in that hearing by making them aware of what their rights are. You know, if we need to take a break, we can take a break. If you want to speak to the panel by yourself even, that's an option available to you. So that's information that an experienced solicitor can share. Afterwards, it'll be the solicitor that goes out the room and will offer the opportunity to explain the decision that's just taken place. Make sure that they've taken on board the reasons behind it, or at least can understand it. And it might not be that right after the hearing is the most appropriate time for that, when emotions can be high, but a solicitor meeting with a client later on to also debrief and go through can help all the professionals working for that child. And really thereafter checking in as well. Again, this can promote the best interests of the child and what happens next. So there were barriers within, whilst producing this, the solicitors reported what barriers they can come across, and that goes in line with what it is they want to achieve. So moving on from what we've just spoken about, solicitors reported barriers around having the time to build rapport and advise the clients and explain decisions. Problems with that can come from not having all the information, not feeling that they've got the time through legal aids. There's restrictions on legal aid time. There's limited quality assurance of solicitors in hearings. That was reported in the sense that solicitors are not actually monitored during a hearing. There's then wider issues with the hearing system, not just solicitors, and limited awareness by other people in the room of what a solicitor's role is. And hopefully this guide, as Gordon had said at the beginning, we don't only want to see this within the spirit of this is the best practice for a solicitor, but it's really the best practice for a solicitor and other professionals to all work together. So raising awareness of what a solicitor's role is will also raise acceptance of why a solicitor is there and really see the benefits which a solicitor can bring. So representation of clients' views being perceived as adversarial and not in a child's best interests. It's not. Different views will exist as to what the recommendations will be. It's for the panel to make the decision, but it's not wrong for people to have different views. It's keeping that in mind. There can also be a history of culture hostility between roles and trying to break that down, because that really can be a barrier. Solicitors reported some solicitors are also safeguarders. One day they might be representing a child at a hearing, but the next day they might be representing a relevant person or a sibling, and they might feel a different feeling as they walk into that room. They might not feel as welcome. And so it's really considering the role of a solicitor across the board, irrelevant of who they're representing.
Fantastic, Rebecca. Thanks for sharing both the breadth of that, but also the nuance involved in. And thanks also to all of the solicitors that took part in those focus groups and were part of the group that developed the guide. So we're now going to move on to a couple of slides where we talk about top tips. So these are recommendations from solicitors that come from both children and from other adults that are involved, including solicitors that are involved in hearings. Before we hear the top tips, we'll hear again from Lisa, I think for the last time, talking about the top tip that's most important to her.
So Lisa, there are 5 top tips from children in the guide. Could you tell me which is most important to you and why you've chosen that one?
Yeah, so my best top tip is being their best fit solicitor. This is important for children, as children need someone who can represent their interests, because children and young people cannot fully argue for their own rights, needs or preferences, and sometimes they need a solicitor who can push for what's best interest in them. A lot of cases are complex, and like solicitors need to understand that even though they're saying one thing, they might need to dive a bit deeper and understand what the child really needs and what comes in their best interest.
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great answer, and thanks for answering all those questions.
So just briefly, we'll share with you the top tips, and you can see these condensed in the top tip link that we sent you, and also how they were developed within the broader guide. So we have Know Your Stuff, and that applies to understanding the law, child development, trauma, neurodiversity, and how to communicate in different ways, including non-verbally. Be aware of how difficult experiences like bullying, neglect, or trauma can affect children. Consider what's happened to them, not what's wrong with them. The second is show you care. Be kind, honest, and respectful. Don't judge. Treat every child with dignity and take time to understand their situation. Build trust and make them feel valued. Lisa talked about the third, be the right fit for them. Every child is different. Some want a friendly, relaxed approach, while others prefer to keep it formal. Try asking them their preference. If possible, let young people choose their solicitor, for example, from a short bio or description, including choosing someone they feel comfortable with. I think that speaks to what we all need in life. We need personalisation in any service that we receive. The fourth is communicate well. Listen carefully and explain things in a way they understand. Don't talk down or make things sound too simple. Check what they know before giving advice. Don't assume. Keep them updated and follow through on promises. Stick around and follow up. Don't just disappear after the case. Check in and don't act awkward if you see them later. So probably top tips for all of us and not just solicitors. But I'll pass over to Rebecca now, who's going to share what adults, including solicitors, other legal professionals, panel members and advocacy providers lead us to in terms of top tips.
Thank you. The top tips here actually align with what the children also said. So building relationships and taking time. Spend time to get to know the child before, during and after the hearing. It takes a special person to represent children. Try to put yourself in the children's shoes and see how they see things. We were also told offering different ways to communicate, phone, text, WhatsApp, or meeting in a place that they feel comfortable. Be clear, manage expectations, explain your role and what will happen. Honesty. Be honest that it's a possibility if it is in a case that a child might not return home or they might go to secure. They need to know this in order to trust you. Follow through on what you say you'll do. That's very important, and don't just disappear straight after the hearing. Focus on the child. Keep the focus on the child and try to see things from their point of view and tailor your approach to that child, what works best for them. Help children feel prepared and supported for the hearing. That includes providing them with information about their rights, like speaking to a panel by themselves. Communicate clearly, avoid all legal jargon, and allow yourself to speak in a way that the child can understand. And check that they're understanding. Check in with them, don't assume it. Explain their rights, but don't overwhelm them with legal terms. And after the hearing, always explain what happened. Go over it, give them the opportunity to answer questions. And finally, show you care. Be empathetic, respectful and approachable. Don't be intimidating and adapt to your style depending on what the child's preference is. Also think about your appearance. Dressing less formally can help a child feel more at ease.
We'll finish off with some final thoughts. Children and adults agreed that being caring, respectful, communicating well, having a personalised approach and putting the child's needs first matters most. Legal knowledge is important, but how you treat the child makes the biggest difference. And again, as we've said throughout today, that applies to all of us in all of our roles. Young people said that the values and personal qualities matter the most. And as one put it, knowledge and skills can be learned, but being a good person is what really counts. So we'd like to acknowledge the collaboration from each of the agencies on the screen in delivering this guide and doing the background work that has got us to this stage. Please do dip into the guide and get in touch if it's helpful to take this forward, your organisation or individually. I wanted to also thank, because his logo is not on that screen, Paul Sturdy from Livingston Brown was heavily involved in the work, and mentioned Sheriff Gallagher at the start. Thanks to the young people who took part in this, and thanks to all of you in the audience today who gave up your time and contributed to the team. Thanks so much, and good luck with your collaborative work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.